What we just witnessed in the WNBA was nothing short of absolute madness. Fresh clips and heated reactions are everywhere, showing Kelsey Mitchell boldly calling out Aya Wilson and even the referees. Honestly, it turned into one of the dirtiest, most suspicious and rigged-looking games you'll ever come across. We're talking cheap fouls, wild technicals, and a setup Indiana was never supposed to survive. But here's the twist: they completely flipped the script. So, do you think Vegas is panicking right now? The Aces walked into their home arena expecting a coronation, right? The MVP trophy was already polished, the media was prepared to celebrate, and the script was practically written. Aya Wilson was supposed to dominate from start to finish. Everyone expected Becky Hammond to completely outthink Indiana from the sidelines. The referees, on top of that, were seemingly there to tilt everything in Vegas's favor. But instead, the night spiraled into a shocking disaster. What followed was a total meltdown fueled by pure arrogance, careless and sloppy execution, and honestly some of the worst, most unprofessional officiating I've ever seen in a playoff matchup. Let me break this down real quick, because one of the moments in this game exposed the blatant double standards on full display. It clearly showed that officials only pay attention to whatever they feel like noticing at the time. And the WNBA? Well, it was shocking. At no level of basketball would anyone ever call what happened to Kelsey Mitchell a technical foul. She drove hard to the rim, absorbed contact across her body, finished the play, and instead of earning the free throw she deserved, she got punished instead. Why? Because the whistle seemed to work only one way. And if Wilson was on the court, suddenly the entire rule book magically shifted. That right there was the theme of the entire night. One standard for Indiana and a completely different standard for Las Vegas. The Las Vegas Aces came charging out with pure aggression, throwing everything they had, except actual good basketball. Elbows, forearms, constant flops, you name it. Winning cleanly clearly wasn't part of their plan. They just wanted to bully their way through. But here's the problem. Indiana didn't flinch for even a second. They ignored the whistles, brushed off the cheap shots, and instead tightened their execution, ran crisp sets, and punished Vegas every single time focus slipped. And this is exactly the nonsense people are fed up with. Tired of blatant inconsistencies, tired of the favoritism that certain teams with certain jerseys always seem to enjoy. It's honestly crazy. From the opening moments, you could see the Fever weren't intimidated at all. Kelsey Mitchell set the tone by relentlessly attacking Belline and refusing to back down. She completely broke down the Aces' defense, forcing them to collapse and then punishing them the moment they sagged off. Odyssey Sims turned into an absolute bulldog on both ends of the floor, never allowing Chelsea Gray or Jackie Young to find any rhythm or comfort. Aaliyah Boston and Brianna Turner rotated with flawless timing, shutting down easy looks for Wilson in the post and forcing her into tough fadeaways and heavily contested hooks. The Fever weren't just hanging on out there. They were controlling the tempo and dictating the entire pace of the game. Meanwhile, Vegas looked rattled and totally shook. This was the same team bragging about being the real Aces just days earlier, and now they suddenly looked completely lost. Every foul call they were counting on simply never came. Every flop looked more ridiculous than the one before it, and instead of adjusting their game, the Aces completely melted down. Aya Wilson, who had just been handed her MVP trophy only hours earlier, answered the pressure with elbows, constant arguments at the refs, and a string of forced shots that kept clanging off the rim. By the time the night was over, she finished shooting just 6 for 22. Those are nowhere near MVP numbers, not even close. And then came the bigger storyline, the foul situation. How does the body even hold up at this stage of the season, especially after everything you've been through, when you're always crashing down to the floor? I'll be honest, I'm definitely feeling sore right now. It's starting to catch up with me. But the mindset is simple. Keep warming up, keep stepping back out there, and try to push the pain out of my head as much as possible. That's just what this time of year is all about. Every single player is battling through bumps, bruises, and lingering aches. And when it's playoff basketball, you don't dwell on it. You push forward and forget about it. Because winning matters more than anything else. All night long, Lexi Hall was battered around the court, shoved, elbowed, and sent crashing to the hardwood again and again. The so-called screens weren't just questionable. They looked more like full-blown WWE wrestling moves. Opponents threw hips, leaned shoulders, and even slid legs out to trip her, yet the whistle stayed completely silent. The officials simply turned a blind eye. But here's the impressive part. Rather than complaining, Hall locked in even harder on defense. With every single possession, she made Jackie Young's night miserable, forcing her to move east to west instead of attacking north to south. By the time the final buzzer sounded, Hall actually had one of the best plus-minus ratings on the entire floor. And then came the sequence that perfectly captured the absurdity. Kelsey Mitchell drove hard to the rim, absorbed contact from Aya Wilson, scored the bucket, and somehow the referees gave a technical to Mitchell. Not on Wilson, not on the Aces, on Mitchell. At that point, it stopped being serious basketball and became pure parody. Even the loudest Vegas supporters had to shake their heads in disbelief. What unfolded on the court wasn't officiating. It was flat-out theater, a desperate push to swing momentum back toward the home team. But here's the beautiful truth. The ball never lies. Vegas clanked free throws, while Indiana calmly drilled jumper after jumper. Karma came crashing in quicker than the referees could even cover their tracks. And Mitchell wasn't just piling up points. She was sending a powerful statement. Each bucket silenced the roaring Vegas crowd, and every dagger three-pointer turned their swagger into sheer panic. By the time the final horn sounded, she had dropped a sizzling 34 points with complete command of the game. No excuses, no bailout whistles, just ruthless, cold-blooded shot-making. And right beside her, Odyssey Sims delivered with seasoned composure, slowing the tempo when needed and cranking it up whenever Vegas started stumbling. Natasha Howard battled as if every possession meant the end of her career, cutting off second-chance opportunities and muscling up against much bigger bodies in the paint. And Brianna Turner? She forced Aya Wilson to grind for every single bucket. Nothing easy at all. No clean catches, no effortless spins, just disciplined, physical defense at every turn. On paper, Indiana was supposed to crumble. 6 players were unavailable. Caitlin Clark was sidelined. Sophie Cunningham out. Sydney Carlson missing, and their bench thinner than it had ever been. Analysts wrote them off before the opening tip. Commentators labeled it a mismatch. Becky Hammond even went so far as to say Indiana hadn't faced the real Aces. Translation? This was meant to be a quick, painless sweep. But instead of folding under the pressure, the Fever flipped the script and rolled straight over Vegas. And in the process, the Aces exposed just how vulnerable they actually are. When Wilson isn't rescuing them with a monster 40-point night, they suddenly look lost, unsure of where the offense is supposed to come from. Chelsea Gray had her moments, and Jackie Young knocked down a couple of tough shots. But none of it really mattered, because Indiana simply refused to bend. The instant Aya Wilson hit the bench in foul trouble, Vegas unraveled completely. What had been a tight 3-point contest suddenly exploded into a double-digit deficit, ballooning to 14 points in just a few short minutes. That's not championship basketball. That's pure dependency. And then came Becky Hammond's post-game spin session. When asked about her team's collapse, she casually chalked it up to missed layups and wasted opportunities. But let's be real. That wasn't analysis. It was insultingly lazy denial. Indiana flat-out dominated in every single phase of the game. They defended tougher, executed sharper, and shot the ball with ruthless precision. This wasn't some stroke of bad luck. It was Indiana proving they were simply the better team on that night. But Hammond, even then, couldn't bring herself to admit the truth. Becky Hammond couldn't bring herself to admit the obvious, that her MVP was outplayed by Aaliyah Boston, or that her veteran stars were locked down by the relentless defense of Lexi Hall and Odyssey Sims. Instead, she chose to hide behind tired cliches. Meanwhile, inside the Fever locker room, the atmosphere told a completely different story. Kelsey Mitchell spoke with honesty and conviction. She gave credit to Vegas's talent, but at the same time made it crystal clear that Indiana came to fight and had no plans of disappearing quietly. Her words weren't angry outbursts or emotional rants. They were measured, confident statements that cut straight through the noise. She exposed the nonsense without sounding bitter, highlighting how her team battled through cheap shots and questionable officiating. And that contrast is exactly what made the night feel so poetic. Vegas might have the hardware, the hype, and the national headlines, but Indiana carried the heart, the grit, and the unshakable refusal to back down. When the final buzzer sounded, The scoreboard spoke louder than any narrative. Fever 89. Aces 73. On their own floor, on what was supposed to be MVP celebration night. The so-called juggernaut was humbled by the sixth seed everyone had already written off. And here's a number Vegas really doesn't want to face. Historically, in best-of-5 series, 72% of teams that take Game 1 go on to advance. Translation? Indiana didn't just steal a win. They tilted the odds of the entire series. What was supposed to be a coronation suddenly transformed into a full-blown crisis. And the irony of it all was almost cinematic. Just hours earlier, cameras were locked on Aya Wilson, smiling with her MVP trophy, paraded as the league's untouchable star, the unstoppable face of women's basketball. Yet only a few hours later, she was clanking layups, swinging elbows, and pleading with referees for help against a Fever squad missing half of its roster and still refusing to fold. What was supposed to be a coronation ended up as nothing short of a public humiliation. Strip away the hype, the highlight reels, and the PR machine, and only one thing really counts: what happens on the hardwood. And on that stage, Indiana proved to be sharper, tougher, hungrier, and above all, fearless. Look no further than Aaliyah Boston. She may not command the same spotlight Aya Wilson does, but she delivered a defensive masterclass for the ages. Wilson shot just 6-4-22 from the field because Boston, Turner, and Howard refused to give her even a sliver of space. Every post-up was challenged, every spin move met a wall, every fadeaway smothered by a hand in her face. Wilson wasn't dominating, she was flailing. And the contrast couldn't have been starker. Boston played with calm discipline and quiet authority, while Wilson unraveled into frustration, flops, and desperate pleas. And then, once again, came Lexi Hall. She may not have stuffed the stat sheet, but Lexi Hall turned Jackie Young's night into a complete nightmare. Every single cut was denied, every jumper met resistance, and every drive ended with a wall in front of her. That staggering plus 24 plus minus tells the whole story. Hall was the quiet assassin, doing all the gritty, thankless work while Wilson and the aces wasted energy whining for whistles. And if you paid close attention, you could see just how deeply it rattled Vegas. They thought intimidation would shake Indiana. They believed constant shoves and theatrical flops would break the Fever's rhythm. Instead, it backfired spectacularly. Indiana fed off the disrespect. Every hard foul added fuel, and every bogus whistle only made them lock in tighter. By the closing minutes, the Fever were smiling, and it was Vegas who looked like the underdogs, pleading for sympathy. And that's the real headline here. This so-called WNBA dynasty, with all its trophies, star power, and hype, melted down the moment one superstar had an off night. True dynasties adapt. They bend without breaking and always find another way to win. What we witnessed in Vegas wasn't a dynasty. It was a house of cards built entirely on Aya Wilson's shoulders. Take her out of rhythm, and suddenly the whole structure collapses. Meanwhile, Indiana showcased what real team basketball looks like. Kelsey Mitchell wasn't just pouring in points. She was orchestrating the offense. She found Turner for easy buckets, drew defenders and kicked to open shooters, and controlled the tempo like a seasoned veteran who had been waiting her whole career for this very stage. Odyssey Sims added that calming hand, slowing the pace whenever Vegas tried to drag the Fever into chaos. Natasha Howard fought like a warrior in the paint, and even role players like Shaw Petty and Aerial Powers sparked crucial moments at just the right time. That's exactly why nobody wants to face this Fever squad. They're not just hot, they're flat out dangerous, because they've got nothing to lose and absolutely everything to gain. Indiana is playing free, fearless basketball, while their opponents are playing tight and scared. And then, of course, there were the referees. This game was an officiating disaster. Technical fouls tossed around like candy. Moving screens ignored. Flops rewarded. Blatant shoves whistled as nothing. It felt like the officials were reading from two entirely different manuals, one favoring Vegas and one punishing Indiana. But here's the ultimate kicker. Even with all of that nonsense stacked against them, the Fever still walked away with the win. That's how much better, sharper, and hungrier they really were. Indiana didn't just beat the Aces, they overcame the Stripes as well. And that's exactly why Kelsey Mitchell's post-game comments carried so much weight. She didn't whine, she didn't complain, and she didn't make excuses. Instead, she acknowledged Vegas's talent, respected Wilson's resume, but made it crystal clear Indiana wasn't backing down. She said it plain. Indiana played harder, wanted it more, and proved they belonged on this stage. And those words hit even harder because Mitchell had just torched the so-called best defense in the league for 34 points of her own. Now the pressure has flipped completely. Vegas, the reigning champions, suddenly find themselves staring at the possibility of going down 0-2 on their very own floor. That isn't just pressure, that's pure panic. They've been exposed for what they are, one-dimensional, overly reliant on Wilson, with a defense that isn't nearly as sharp as advertised and a composure that clearly cracks under fire. If Indiana brings that same relentless energy in Game 2, this series could be finished before it even makes its way back to Indianapolis. And here's the funniest twist. Those same analysts who dismissed the Fever before the series are now scrambling to rewrite their narratives. Before Game 1, Indiana wasn't even supposed to matter. Now, they might be rewriting the entire WNBA playoff script. After one game, the entire conversation flipped. Suddenly, everyone wanted to rave about Indiana's grit and Kelsey Mitchell's fearless leadership. Funny how quickly the narrative shifts once reality smacks the so-called experts right in the face. But fans who've been watching all season already knew the truth. The Fever have been grinding toward this moment for months. They've endured injuries, constant disrespect, and endless questions about whether they even deserved a playoff spot. And now here they are, just 2 wins away from the WNBA Finals. That's not hype. That's not luck. That's pure, hard-earned basketball. Meanwhile, Vegas is left staring down some brutally uncomfortable questions. Can they actually win if Aya Wilson doesn't completely take over? Can Becky Hammon deliver real adjustments instead of tossing out tired excuses? And can this supposedly deep roster actually show up when it truly matters most? Right now, all we've seen from Vegas is a team folding under pressure. Indiana, on the other hand, has none of those issues. They know exactly who they are. Mitchell is the fearless closer. Boston is the anchor in the paint. Sims is the steady hand guiding the tempo. And the role players? They bring the spark at just the right moments. This team trusts one another, empowers one another. And that's why they're thriving when everyone else expected them to collapse. That be why the time this series is over. Maybe the Aces claw their way back, but Game 1 already revealed the undeniable truth. Vegas isn't untouchable. Wilson isn't flawless. And the referees can't always bail them out. Indiana just proved that heart, toughness, and composure can flip the entire playoff script at SO. Here's the message to the WNBA, to the media, and to the fans. The Fever are here. They're not afraid. They're not backing down. And if Vegas doesn't figure it out quickly, all that dynasty talk will sound ridiculous when the 6th seed is the team celebrating in the finals. The Aces thought this would be a walkover. Instead, Kelsey Mitchell and the Fever stormed into their house, exposed the refs, humbled Aya Wilson, and flipped the entire series on its head. And now, Indiana is just 2 wins away from truly shocking the world. What do you think? Are the Fever about to pull off one of the biggest upsets in WNBA history? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe for more breakdowns just like this one.